Neden Müslüman oldun?
Great. Well, it's my pleasure to talk about this subject. It comes down to the important point about the fundamental power and beauty of the Quran. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to shorten it and just point to the important points. It goes back to my childhood. I was lucky that I lived abroad in London. My dad was in international business in Paris and Geneva, Mexico, and other countries. And from my childhood, I liked history and I liked learning foreign languages. I learned a little bit of French. And this sort of interest in languages and history and literature stayed with me. When it came time to go to university, my dad suggested that I consider getting a fellowship, a Navy fellowship, especially that my grandfather had been in the US Navy. So I applied and I got a Navy scholarship, especially because the university is quite expensive in the US. But this gave me, and I received the fellowship, this gave me the freedom to study what I liked and not worry about getting a job afterwards. So I studied English literature, and I love the history of English literature, 19th century novels and this sort. After my graduation, I went into the Navy, and during my Navy experience, I was sent for 1 year to the UN, and I lived 4 months in Ismailia in Egypt and 8 months in Damascus. And this was the time when I really started studying Arabic, and I became fascinated with the sounds, the difficulty, the challenge of the language, the richness of the language. I started taking private lessons in Damascus, and I really changed my plan at this point. I had always thought, because I loved English, I would spend a couple years in the Navy and then go back to graduate school in English literature. But because of this, I thought maybe I'll do comparative literature. And maybe I'll compare Arabic and maybe perhaps French and English literature in this program. And in preparation for that, I knew I needed to spend more time studying Arabic. So after I got out of the Navy in 1997, I went to Cairo for 2 years to study Arabic. And this is where the more I got into Arabic, the more I liked it. And then I went to graduate school at the University of California, Berkeley. And here's where I started studying classical Arabic poetry, classical Arabic literature. And this was my first exposure to the Quran. My PhD was on the structure and the harmony of classical Arabic poems. And of course, if you're going to study classical Arabic literature, you have to deal with the base, the foundational text being the Quran. Gradually, I realized that I was going to leave my interest in English and comparative literature aside and focus especially and make my career in Arabic literature. And it was at Berkeley during the 7 years when I was first exposed to the Quran, and I was struck by its power and its beauty, and that feeling only increased with time. And then when I was about to graduate in 2005, 2006, I was hoping to go back to Egypt and teach at the American University of Cairo, but I was fortunate that right when I was about to get my PhD, the American University of Kuwait had just opened up and they needed Arabic professors. I applied and I fortunately got a job there teaching Arabic language and literature. I've been there since 2006. And I guess I was raised as a Protestant Christian, and then soon after moving to Kuwait in 2006, 2007, this is when I converted to Islam. And again, it's really the power and the beauty of the Quran that led to my conversion. This was the main reason. And I was raised, again, as a Protestant Christian. I thought it wasn't too much of a departure going from Christianity to Islam. It was just sort of embracing a religion that encompassed Christianity as well. And reading the Quran, I was struck by its symmetry, its coherence on various levels. And it became quite easy to acknowledge that this extraordinary work was inspired by God and complementing the Bible and the Torah before. So it was quite a easy admission finally to see this Quran is a miracle, and if it's a miracle of power and beauty, then it's inspired. And this is why I converted, and I've been a Muslim since 2007, and I'm happy about this decision, and the more I study the Quran, the more I'm just in awe of the power and the beauty. So this is the essential reason.
Çevrendeki insanların kararına tepkileri nasıl oldu?
They saw it as a personal decision. They didn't really, my family is all Christian, and I was then married, and after I got married, I had, went through a process, and in fact, this marriage led to divorce. My family asked, are you going to switch back to Christianity? And I said, no, I'm happy. As a Muslim, I'm going to stay as a Muslim, and again, the more I've studied the Quran, the more I've realized I'm in awe of this text, and it's been easy to stay as a Muslim. And I'm an academic focusing on Arabic language and literature, but I hope this is something that everyone can agree on, that this text is truly, truly extraordinary. My first book, I was focusing on Arabic poetry, my first book, and then I switched sort of doing the compositional analysis of the Quran, structure and Quranic interpretation. And I think the compositional majesty occurs on a variety of levels, on the whole Quran being put together, on the individual, on an intermediate level, the individual surahs, and then even on a micro level, the individual ayahs, for example, Ayat al-Kursi, the way this is composed according to a symmetrical pattern. For example, it's so densely interconnected, and especially if we recall that it was revealed over a process of 23 years in different circumstances. The Prophet initially started out as a single voice talking about the judgment is very near and we need to worship the one God. And then he collected a following, and then of course he was a leader of a new community in Medina. Through a variety of situations, a long period of revelation, but despite all this, it's perfectly, incredibly put together. And this to me is a sign of its incredible power and beauty. So I guess I also acknowledge that, so I hope this is something where secular conservatives, we can all agree on that it is an astoundingly powerful and beautiful text. And I acknowledge that it's hard to feel that completely except when you're reading the Arabic Quran. I prefer the English translation of Arbery. It's very resonant and sonorous and deep and powerful, but I think no one can really convey the true, the combination of the rhyme, the changing meters, and the message, simple message being reinforced so many times. There's one God, very simple theology. Every soul is responsible for his or her actions on earth, and the judgment will come. It could come very soon. No one knows when judgment will come, but the good will be rewarded and the evil will be, or the bad will be punished. This basic message occurs throughout the Quran, but I think you could compare it to the idea of theme and variations. It's a simple message, but it occurs throughout the Quran, but you never feel like it's repetitive. It's always interesting on every occurrence. In fact, I think an important article this past year, 2024, Jawahir Dawood published in Islamic Studies Journal about, and he analyzed 11 different passages in the Quran that are dealing with similar themes. And even though it's sort of repeating the same idea 11 times, same basic idea, each occurrence is particularly suited either by rhythm or words or slight emphasis here in this surah on a particular aspect, a slight emphasis in a different surah. Each one is completely situated, perfectly situated to its individual surah, and across 11 different examples. So it's a basic message. It's the theology is straightforward and simple, but it's never repetitive. In fact, it's surprising each time you hear it, and it's also an aesthetic experience in Arabic. Each time it sort of strikes you with the rhythm, the words, the variation each time. So I acknowledge that in translation you don't get the full effect. I mean, you can see this strong message, this powerful message, and in certain great translations you can get a certain sense of the glory of the Quran, but not the true sense. In reading in Arabic, it makes a really incredible, almost astounding impression on you. The more you study it, the more you're in awe of this text. So again, this points back to this is certainly among the masterpieces, if you want to put it in secular terms, of any literature. But beyond that, the basic theology and just the miracle, how this occurred, one person suddenly coming out of appearing in Mecca and continuing the career in Medina and able to come forth with this revelation in eloquent Arabic that, and we recall among the Arabs, the poetry and eloquence was really their prime art form, especially among the Bedouins. They didn't, their emphasis on being able to transport materials easily, so they're not making things heavy objects to carry. Their art is their literature and their poetry. So it was this context, this milieu, that the Quran descended, and despite that, this is the challenge you see in the surahs. If you're in doubt that this is an extraordinary revelation, the Prophet addresses the unbelievers in Mecca and in Medina. Well, if you're in doubt, then come forward with something, you know, a surah that's similar, or 10 surahs that are like the Quran. And this, of course, is a challenge that's never met. So to me, being a Muslim, I'm a literary scholar, and for me, what's always struck home is just the incredible, awesome literary power of the Quran. In translation, but especially studying Arabic. And the more I study it, the more I'm just amazed at the Quran. And this is so again, I feel like it's not too far, it's sort of not too far moved from Christianity into a sort of a more embracing religion, but has a scripture that's truly, truly astounding, truly miraculous in its power and beauty.
Sizin için Kur'an'ın en ilginç bulduğunuz edebi güzelliği hangisiydi?
I guess for me, what I find most impressive and amazing is its sort of dense, very, very dense interconnection. And my background was studying the classical Arabic poetry and seeing how the beginning often connects to the end, and in the middle you have the heart of the poem. In a praise poem, this is where you'll find the patron's name often mentioned. In a love poem, for example, you find a portrait, perhaps a description of the beloved in the center. This idea, I found, it's a similar structural pattern in the Quran. For example, Ayat al-Kursi is organized according to ring composition. Very detailed symmetries, where the first part connects to the last part, the second to last reflects the second part, and so forth. And then you have the kernel in the very middle. Just seeing how this pattern, symmetrical patterns, are apparent in the Quran on a variety of levels is, to me, especially striking, because you can just sit and listen to a qari, or reciter, and just appreciate the beauty of the sound and the depth, and then you listen to the message, and it's driving home a very basic, powerful message that, again, every soul is responsible for his or her actions. Judgment is coming. No one knows when. It could be very soon, and every soul will be judged based on what they do on earth. So at first you sort of the music of the Quran, or the aesthetic experience, and then driving home the simple message. But you can take it a level further. If you examine the structures, you see how closely interconnected it is in this particular surah. And this is not something that's apparent initially. So something it's beautiful to listen to and powerful, but then you realize how densely interconnected it is. Each ayah sort of leading into the next one, a logical progression. Then that particular surah is placed in a certain position in the Quran that's linked to the surah before it and the one that follows, part of the larger pattern. So I guess, to me, what is most amazing is when you finally, upon deeper study, when you appreciate these structural patterns in the Quran, that you kind of, you just read and you're in awe of it. That's my experience.
Kur'an metninin rastgele, anlaşılmaz ve karmaşık bir üsluba sahip olduğunu söyleyenler var. Siz ise tam tersini söylüyorsunuz. Neden?
I think this is why for many people the Quran has maybe been inaccessible for a long time. It's not a straightforward narrative, although there are some surahs like Surah Yusuf, the 12th surah, that's very much of a story, the captivating story from beginning to end. The beginning is linked to the middle and then to the end in a straightforward narrative pattern. But most surahs are arranged according a symmetrical pattern, which we're probably not as familiar with in the tradition of reading novels and seeing movies. But and the Quran has been criticized as being sort of haphazardly organized or just thrown together, which is a very false, I think, wrong accusation, because I think these patterns were not appreciated so much. The structure, symmetrical patterns, parallelism, chiastic patterns, particularly ring composition, where the first part corresponds to the last part, the second part corresponds to the second to the last, and really the heart of the message, the main message, is right in the middle. So I think, fortunately, because of the literary study of the Quran, we've come to appreciate that in the last 10 or 20 years. You don't hear so much, like Rudy Parrott's, this accusation. This was common, especially in Europe in the 20th century. The Quran is 19th and 20th century. The Quran is just sort of a hodgepodge thrown together. Now, pretty much not many, at least not many of the scholars, we've come beyond that and realize it's a very complex pattern, symmetrical pattern. It's something we're not expecting, but indeed there are intricate symmetries in the Quran. And I would argue they are not just aesthetically beautiful, but they also lead us to certain passages and sort of highlight central passages in the Quran.